Let's take another look at one of the Psalms this week. I want to preach from Psalm 84 this week, and so I want to read this aloud to you, and you can follow it on the overhead with your eyes. Psalm 184, this is all 12 verses of the Psalm. It begins with words that are already familiar to us this morning. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, indeed it faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God. Even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young at your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Happy are those who live in your house, ever singing your praise. Is that word up there, Selah? Is it? You know, I don't know what it means, but here's a good thing we'll call it today. Take a breath. Whenever you see that, maybe that's what it says. Take a breath. And we continue. Happy are those whose strength is in you, in whose heart are the highways to Zion. As they go through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The early rain also covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength. The God of gods will be seen in Zion. O Lord, God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Take a breath. Behold our shield, O God. Look on the face of your anointed. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than live in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. He bestows favor and honor. No good thing does the Lord withhold from those who walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, happy is everyone who trusts in you. May God bless the reading of this word. I wonder what was on the mind of the psalmist. I wonder what he had just experienced, don't you? Where in the world was this person coming from that they would write this wonderful piece? You kind of get the idea maybe they were in church. Do you do that with your mind? Better is one day in your courts and in the presence of God. And so when I grew up, isn't it really good to be in church together? And the answer for me a lot of times was, well, it was okay, but no. I could have thought of several different places I'd rather be. Maybe he was coming from the temple, or such a great experience, but where did he come up with this joy about the presence of God? I mean, this is a horrible sermon. We're just going to do this today. Here, you can have that, okay? Hold on to it. Don't lose it, because I might need it again in a minute. Well, there's more than you know to that, but we'll talk about it in a minute. You see, this is a sermon about presence. And I thought it might help if you thought that I was present to the sermon too, since some of you might need a little help being present to it yourself. And there's nothing to make me more present to the sermon and you more present to my predicament, say that 3 times real fast, than for you to see me tear up the notes and give them to someone else, and now you know the truth, that I'm as lost in this as you are. I'm winging it just like you. All of a sudden, you're way more interested in what I've got to say, aren't you, huh? Yeah, you want to pay me for preparing all week and get on me if I don't. You sound a little unprepared this week, Doug, but boy, you're just on the edge of your seat. I've always said as a guitar player, people like watching me fly by the seat of my pants. That's what they pay for. So here I am present. Now, there's one way to demonstrate presence for you, okay, is to say, let's just start over. Let's see where this goes together. Here's another way. You ever play this game? Let's just open a book. To whatever page. I'll read whatever comes up, and we'll just preach on that. I know a pastor who does youth sermons like that, children's sermons. They pull an item out of a bag, and they preach about whatever the item is, and the guy has no chance to prepare ahead of time. Well, you're really into that sermon, aren't you? So if I just open this and point, and it's sort of a safe bet. It's Brother Lawrence, the practice of the presence of God. I mean, it's a pretty safe bet that anywhere I point in this book, there's going to be something about presence. Here's what Brother Lawrence says on page 91 of all pages to just open up to. During the first years, Brother Lawrence says, I usually spent my fixed times of prayer thinking about death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Oh, those are some big topics. Oh, and my sins. I like the way that kind of landed on the next page. I continued in this way for several years, but during the rest of my day, even while working, I applied myself to practicing the presence of God, whom I always considered to be so close to me that he could be found in the depths of my heart. Doing this gave me such a high esteem for God that faith alone was capable of satisfying me. Wow. Soon, without being aware of it, I found myself doing the same thing during my fixed prayer times. And this gave me sweetness and consolation. That is how I began. You got that piece of paper? I may need it. Would you look on there and tell me what it says? No, I'm not. I'm serious. Tell them what's on that paper. You were lost. That's all. There's nothing on the paper. Yeah, there's nothing on the paper that I tore up and gave Wyatt. And I had a bookmark in the Brother Lawrence book, too. Although I really did just open it and point earlier today. Do you understand how you got more present when I went through that little routine for you? And that is what we're here to talk about today, is presence. Christians have something to offer the world that you can't find anywhere else. And it's called Emmanuel, God with us. Gandhi probably was one of the greatest acting Christians of the 20th century, but he couldn't profess Christianity. And I guess between the two, I kind of favored acting. I think Gandhi did a great job of living Jesus. But he couldn't profess it because he couldn't understand God in flesh. Most foreign religions have a serious problem with God in flesh. Demigods are a different situation. But we have this amazing presence of God as believers and as disciples of Jesus to offer the world. That's our gift, is that God is always with us. I like what Rob Bell says about Moses and the burning bush, is that when Moses saw the burning bush, he first knew instinctively to take his shoes off because he understood he was standing on holy ground. But as the mystics say, when one bush is on fire, they're all on fire. And once you've stood on holy ground, it's all holy ground. It's all holy ground. The presence of God cannot be contained to a sanctuary, to a building, to an experience, to an event. We talked about thin places. The places where what divides us from that presence has been revealed a little. It's been worn down a bit, and we can sense through those thin places that God is with us in a special way. But it's the truth whether we're in the thin places or not. Real presence is what Christians have to offer the world. I wonder if we're practicing real presence in our lives. Here's a piece of training. If someone wants to interrupt you and they are not an important part of your day and they're distracting you from things that you need to be doing, there are some simple things you can do. While speaking to them, you can be looking at your watch. You'll get the hint, won't you? Or here's a good one, look over their shoulder. Look past the person that you don't want to be talking to. Or fake a distraction. That's a good one. If you're in the workplace and you have a secretary, you can get an accomplice in your deception. You can involve your assistant in saying, can you create a distraction? There's a meeting I suddenly have to get to. I have these same issues. It's hard for me to be doing one task and talking on the phone for another task altogether, but yet I try. Do you do that? How many times have you been talking to somebody on the other line, admit it now, and you've been playing solitaire while you were talking to them? While you're admitting it, let's tell the truth, you turn the sound down so they don't hear that, the cards being dealt out, right? Yeah, you got to. You don't want them to know you're not really paying attention to them. Are we really present? I remember going to, we called it Fall Kickoff then in 2001. It was the training event for new church start pastors, and Sean and I went, and we heard Kyle, what was Kyle's name? And he said, you know, when someone comes up to you in the grocery store and you say, how are you today? You're expecting them to say, oh, fine, how are you? But he said no one takes the time to say the truth. Oh, really, honestly, I feel like you know what. Oh, we didn't want that answer. No. Don't have time to invest in that conversation. But should Christians be that present, at least one to another, if not to others? Well, I'm not very good at that either. Sometimes I need to get through the grocery line, get on with the rest of my day. Where do we start? If we don't have time to be that present to every person in the workplace and every person that we come in contact with as we go about the course of our day, where do we start? Are we that present to our own families? Oh, that's picking on you. You're set up for that one. Everybody knows. The people that you're closest to are the first people that you're rude to. It's true of everyone. When will I ever stop getting my feelings hurt at home? I shouldn't do that, because I know that I'm as guilty as anyone. People I neglect the most are the ones who are the closest to me and who I feel the most like aren't going to take revenge on me. Someone said yesterday, if I do it to my friends, it's revenge, but if I do it to my family, it's just payback. Well, okay, so maybe I'm set up and I can't start at home. How about at church? Can we start here? Can we really be present to each other here? Do we really have the time to invest? Do we really honestly care about that? Is this a place where we can begin to practice presence? Well, maybe that's a setup too. Maybe that's a setup too. You know, I could sit in my office 12 hours a day, and you could come one at a time, and I bet I could stay really busy if I would just wait for you. I could be tied up all morning on Sunday, and someone else could lead the songs, because presence is hard to practice. Maybe here's a good place to start. Maybe if we began by being present to God. Maybe I've been trying to do this backwards all this time. Maybe I thought if I got it right with my son, if I got it right with my wife, if I got it right, Lord, with some of you, and maybe I got it backwards. Maybe if we started with God. Because after all, God is not nearly as demanding on me as my son. Not nearly as demanding as my family. Not anywhere close to as demanding as my friends. Maybe if I could just give God 20 minutes a day. You know, I used to teach Sunday school to the high school boys, and then soon it became high school co-ed. I had a large group before I stopped teaching Sunday school, and I had to quit because it was keeping me from being present to this part of the service. But you know what I used to say to those kids before we started church? I'd say, I'm letting you out 10 minutes early. It's time to go drink water. It's bladder check time. It's time to go drink water, go to the bathroom. Because if you can't sit for 1 hour in a church service without having to go get water, or without having to get up and run to the restroom, so do it now, before church. Go drink a whole bunch of water until you just have to go, then take care of your business and get back in here and be present. Could we be present to God through the worship service? Or are we sort of looking over God's shoulder at the clock on the wall? Are we sort of thinking past God to watch for lunch? Or are we caught up even with the same distractions in worship that we get caught up in at home? You know what I'm going to say here, right? Go ahead and say it for me so I'm not the bad guy. Is your phone on silent right now? Is it where it'll vibrate and you'd know if someone called? Has anybody looked at their phone during the course of this sermon? Are there 5 people in here who could tell me what I've been talking about for the last 15 minutes? It's a great time to have another conversation or go to another part of the building, obviously. At least from my vantage point, it appears to be. Can we practice presence to God? You know, sitting still and listening to my sermon really doesn't qualify. Here's a news flash. I'm not God. And everything that comes out of my mouth is not of God. I knew some godly people, but you'd be surprised at what the rest of their life looked like. But 20 minutes a day to sit in the silence, to be quiet, to be still, and to not go to God with that list of things. God, here's what I want. Here's what I need. Here's what's troubling me today. But 20 minutes to sit still in that presence and let whatever it is that troubles you just be. And let whatever it is that you are without just be something that you are without. You won't be less if God doesn't answer your last material prayer with a material blessing. I know of a couple of examples of presence. Henry Nouwen was a great author and a Catholic priest and a social activist who taught at some of the most prestigious Ivy League schools, seminaries. And Philip Yancey interviewed Henry Nouwen late in his life, and he had gone to a community in Canada called the Daybreak Community, where there he was giving care to one indigent man who would never be able to walk, never be able to speak, never be able to use his limbs, to feed himself, to clean himself, to get himself to the restroom, to bathe himself. He couldn't do anything for himself. And Henry Nouwen's life became about meeting every need for this man named Michael. And when Philip Yancey interviewed him, he said, Dr. Nouwen, you have this great gift to share with the rest of the world, and yet you're here in this isolated place taking care of this one man. What humility, what a blessing you must be to him, but yet you're denying all these other folks blessing in order to meet the needs of one. Is this really an honest trade out? And Nouwen's reply to Philip Yancey was, you know, you've misunderstood my situation here. He said, I'm the one who's receiving the blessing here. That's radical presence that we may not be able to practice. We may not be able to leave our homes and our jobs and go and give care to one person or become a monastic in some place. But I know another example of presence. My grandfather, who you rarely hear me talk about. He died when I was 18. He was my best friend all my life. He taught me to fish, taught me to hunt. He bought me my first 5 guitars. He gave me a basement to practice in when his own children wouldn't come visit because of the loud rock and roll band in the basement. He defended me. Then he died when I was 18. And it was after that I saw my grandmother for who she was. She had been moving behind the scenes, taking care of me, taking care of him, taking care of the family. And I had been showering him with all the affection and the attention and doting on him. And my grandmother, without any recognition at all, had been just chugging along day after day after year after year. And it was only after he was gone that I recognized the real presence in my life. The real source of that incredible unconditional love. It didn't start with my grandfather. It came from my grandmother. Now that was presence that didn't demand any attention or any recognition. I get so disappointed sometimes with Christianity demanding to be recognized and demanding attention and demanding to be told, yes, you're the one who's right, you're right. And Jesus, just keep Jesus in this and keep Jesus in that, like Jesus is being offended if someone forgot that it was Jesus in the name of love. I don't think God cares who gets the recognition. I think sometimes we attach our egos to God in deciding how to serve God and what pleases God, when presence is enough. Here's my last thing about it today. Real presence. See, maybe one of the reasons we are not present to each other or to God is because we're scared of real presence. Because we don't want people to know exactly everything. Well, here's the good news. In real presence, you don't have to bring me or anyone else the sordid details of your life. Only people who like to gossip are really interested in any of that stuff, okay? If you tell me you're brokenhearted, that's enough. I don't need to know why and what you did to get that way. You may feel like you need to tell somebody, and that's you, not me. But real presence is coming to God just exactly like you are. And perfection just means complete and whole. Exactly like you are. See, to come to God perfect doesn't mean that you don't have any flaws or that you've hidden anything that you didn't think God could accept or look at. It means that you came without hiding anything. You showed up just like you are, and you were grateful, not expectant, but grateful to God for accepting you whole and complete just like you are. Now, the reason I think that we're not present to other people because we don't trust anybody to accept us just exactly like we are. Think of the person you're the closest to in the whole world. And if you can say, I have nothing to hide from that person, then that's a sacred thing in your life. Most people can't say that. Most people don't trust other folks to accept us just like we are. We expect to be corrected. We expect to be attacked. Somebody said to me just the other day, we need a place to connect here at Wylie Christian Church where we don't have to fake it, where we can be just like we are. And I said, 10 years ago, that place was worship. It's still here. It's still here. The presence of God is here. Close your eyes. The presence of God is here because I can hear it. When I'm not looking, I can hear it. I can hear it breathing. I can hear the Spirit groan. I know the presence of God is here because I have a neighbor sitting near me who I can even hear their shoes creak or their belly grumble. The presence of God is here in communion. God to Son, Son to Spirit, Spirit to the Father, you to your neighbor, me to you, one to another. We are in this time and this place together. And it's lovely. It is lovely. The dwelling place of God. You are a temple of God, Paul would say. And he didn't say you, Doug, you, John, you, Judy. He said you, the gathering, the body, the fellowship, are a temple of God's presence. And it's there in everything we do. Everything you say, every conversation you have, and everything you do in your life is a prayer lived out in the presence of God every moment that you are alive. May God bless that and multiply that in your life. Let's pray.